irrigation, all the pumping out of their lowlands they have to do in Holland, and some further equipment they got from New York City, which pumps water out of the Holland River and purifies it, out of the Hudson River and purifies it. And he was working with all of those and working on a very successful well drilling program in India.
So
Then later,
this is Mr. Bray?
no, I was saying a friend of ours, Dave Eady, and his, I was telling him about these samples of wood. Then he went to Burma.
They're all from the...
He was under the United Nations at that time.
This one's teak, obviously.
And
I don't know what they all are.
When he came back from Burma, he brought me a few samples of things. He was working there on teak. People had been getting their valuable logs out of these exotic Burmese woods and shipping them overseas as logs.
Oh, really?
To teach them to use their material for the making of furniture and things like that. And he continued there until the revolution in Burma. At the time the name was changed to Myanmar as at present. And he just couldn't see a chance of his working it there. He said he'd have to leave the equipment there with the people he'd been working with, and they do the best he could. While in Burma he could work in a new Myanmar. He didn't see the scope.
That's one of David's, isn't it?
Well, that's one of his India. That chair is one of his India things. But those samples talking about just made little scooters of them. One there is an Indian rosewood. Another is an Indian teak.
That was the teak, right?
That is Andaman redwood. It's related to rosewood, but it comes from the Andaman Islands off there. Those two are Indian rosewood.
Oh, that's cool.
If anybody wants some wood, I still have some pieces downstairs. Now the fourth one was a walnut. Walnut.
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, that was a teak. I think it looks like a table I have.
There are differences in teak. That was the kind of Indian teak that we liked best. Came from the same part of the country as that came from, except the finish is different. But that is teak.
We've all made these tables.
That is teak veneer on top of miscellaneous plywood.
But this is, that's for sure.
That's a kind of teak, and the surface of the teak is, I found it pleasing.
What year did you go to India?
34.
So you were right finished school then, or had you gone somewhere else first?
Just finished school. I was supposed to go up to Peace River country, the mission field there. Then they told me that I had a chance to go overseas for study for a year, in scholarship.
Well, that's when you went to Germany?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd have finished in Toronto General Hospital about the same time.
Right.
So we decided to go together.
So you were graduated the same year from school then?
So you were able to live for a year in Germany?
We were almost a year in Germany,
Oh, cool.
So what university were you at?
Marburg.
So did you work over there then, Anna? Would they recognize? They didn't recognize your nursing background.
Well, it was, and we were allowed into the country on what they called a student visa. On a student visa, they were anxious to get foreign currency in, so they get a special exchange rate on Canadian dollars.
So you weren't married then?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
We got married and went out.
You were married right after you graduated then?
We got married in Toronto.
So that would have been 34.
And also another condition was that a person could not work for any remuneration.
But you were telling last time, some of your pictures last time were from your student days when you went up to James Bay. Wasn't it James Bay area?
Oh, student days?
And Hudson Bay, wherever that was.
Students often work to get money,
Yeah.
so I worked to get money.
But you were up there doing logging, and you were doing something construction-wise, weren't you? And then you were doing some church work in the meantime?
No, it wasn't church work. I was working with Frontier College.
Frontier College.
Frontier College is working now mainly as working at literacy in more often in urban communities than anywhere else.
I didn't get who was sponsoring you. I thought maybe the church was the one that was doing the literacy stuff. It was Frontier College.
Just to give you the sequence there.
Churchill, that's where it was. Isn't
Yeah. I'd worked at home, see, but when Harold and Ben were at home, there wasn't that much need. The year 1929, I worked on a barn building gang in Ontario. From everywhere from Cranston's barn over near Mount Hope,
Oh, yeah.
over toward Mount Hope, still in Binbrook Township, up to Beachburg on the Ottawa River
All right.
was the extent.
So it was just a crew that traveled around then?
Yes. It was
We worked there in the summers.
the one summer. Then the next summer of that, 1929, I was, I said that was 29 on the barn building gang. Summer of 1930, I worked at Churchill with the Dominion Department of Railways and Canals. They were preparing the place there for the building of the Churchill grain elevator, which was to give a short road for shipment of prairie grain to Europe. And that year, 1930, I worked with Railways and Canals and the Dominion government. Mostly preparatory work on the harbour, getting ready for the building of the grain elevator. The year 1931, I worked there with the Carter Hall's contracting company, and big building contractors of Winnipeg. We were working on building the grain elevator. Now, I said I was sponsored by the Frontier College, and I worked there. Frontier College now is literacy work mainly in urban areas.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
But then it was in frontier camps.
Right.
So all I had to do was work 10 hours a day on the job. And then time left over in the evening, I met with people who were interested.
Anybody in the community?
I had in the camps.
It had to be workers.
Had a small library there, and lived in what was known as the Bohunk House. And by my own choice, I wanted to be with, because a lot they wanted me to do was literacy work among
Bohans.
we had more than anything else. We had Polish, Ukrainians, were our largest group. We had Scandinavian, few French, main groups I worked with. Then, in addition to that, I did such things as practical building mathematics with some of the workers on it, working at carpentry, that sort of work, who wanted to
So taught them calculations they need for practical day-to-day jobs.
just help them to get more efficient in their own work.
So how did you guys meet? Did you meet in Toronto through school or through...
My parents were they were missionaries.
You see, somehow I thought you were born in England.
No, that's born in India.
So you were born in India, but you were home because you were coming home here to do... Were your parents born here?
No, but they. My father was an Englishman. My mother was born in India, but her father, and I don't know about her mother, he was a Welshman who'd come out from England to work on the railways in India.
Oh.
They were railway people.
Well, see, I sort of caught that from England connection, and I guess I just assumed your parents had gone from England to India.
No.
So who were they sponsored by in India?
My father was. What was his connection? He was a minister.
Well, he went out underage, didn't he? To win glory for the empire and
He was in the
in
military.
the British Army in India.
Oh, okay. But
Later
stayed on to do missionary work.
And
Later
then
on, he got connected, became connected with the railway company, the Western Railway as it's now called. At that time it was called the Bombay Baroda in central India, known sometimes impolitely as the bedbug and crawling insect group. But there, and came up to be as a station master there. But all the time, in his early days in England, being brought up by an aunt who was very kind, very strict, very religious, an Anglican, who insisted he go to church 3 times on Sunday. 3 times was too long. So he got up to India. He still remained interested. He was a devout person. And he got connected more with
not the strict Anglicans.
not strict Anglicans, other groups. And then he became associated with the Canadian Presbyterian Mission, working in India. They were impressed by him, made called him an assistant missionary, and prescribed theological training there that he should do examinations, and he sometimes did that. That would go someplace in India.
To take some courses.
Yes. Then it happened quite a bit later, and he had been very successful in the work he had done, actually working particularly among Aboriginal peoples there. Quite a large Aboriginal group called Beals.
Called
Beals.
Bhils.
It's quite simple. You say a B and H at the same time. Beals. And that's the fun of learning
So
about it.
then he'd met your mother there.
Yes. No, my mother was. Her parents came from. I don't know where my grandmother. I think she was born in India, but my grandfather, he came out from England as a railway man. He was on the railway.
He was from Wales.
Wales, yes.
And they were from a shipbuilding firm in Cardiff.
So then your family goes home on furlough back to Canada.
Because of the connection with the Presbyterian Church.
Oh, I see. I was thinking, why would they go to Canada? But okay, but because of the connection with the Presbyterian Church.
Yes.
And then you meet
So
where?
then became United Church. Canadian Presbyterian, and who joined?
And in 1925, yes.
Right, okay.
Well, in 1930, her parents, they came because the church in Canada wanted to know something about them and hear something of their story, which was a very significant story of work among Aboriginal peoples, the kind of people nobody was interested in very much.
Right.
And while they came to Canada in 1930, and in the fall of 1930, Ida's brother came to Canada about the same time, a little before the time she did, and he was living in one of the university residences there. Just happened he and I were living in the same.
Oh, I see.
And I quite liked him. He was studying engineering at SBS in Toronto. And said one evening, he says,
Maybe you'd like to meet my sister.
well, no, what he said was that my parents, and telling my parents about you that you are interested. I was studying then, and I had made my connection with the mission board at the United Church. And because they knew about that. They knew that I was interested in India, and said, because I was Saturday there, said, I have this evening off, I'm going up to my parents for dinner. They're wondering if you'd come up too. I came. His sister turned up there too.
The rest is history, eh?
Well, I became interested. She did. And
Yes, you saw me back into residence that evening.
we, anyway, we kept up the appointments.
That's interesting.
And her brother, not now living, was working in the airplane manufacturing industry, and for a time in airplane parts manufacturing, was where his engineering took him. He's not living now. He last lived in Guelph, but he was in Bolton and Guelph and other places there, Cambridge.
So obviously India was a natural. I mean, how did you become interested in India? Like as far as to go there for missionary work when you graduated? I mean, there they were going to send you up the Peace River or something.
From the time of...
You probably read a book when you were a kid.
From the time when I was a kid in Fulton Sunday School, I became interested. I think I became very much interested in Bible study. It was just interesting stuff to study because I had good teachers there. A couple of them, very, very outstanding teachers. And then sort of the next step, I got interested particularly in any information that came up about work overseas, the church. So I think that way. Then, student in Toronto, made the acquaintance of, but became very close friends, an Indian student who had come on to Toronto for postgraduate study. In his special study was English, but he had his degree in English from India. And he came on what's called the Massey Scholarship, moneyed Massey family that used to make farm machinery and so on.
When they still had money.
Yeah, in the days when they had a lot of money and built Hart House and places like that, and Massey Hall in Toronto.
Right.
Sponsored by Massey. Are you taking this? I don't think it's worth much.
I think it is.
Yeah, so do I. This is interesting.
Heather's a historian.
And he was, when they were arranging a place for him to live, they thought perhaps Vic residence would be good.
Oh, I see. Oh, so you have to know him.
And got in residence there, and we both of us seemed to have a good deal in common, and quite a friendship got there. And he was planning to go back to India. He wanted to, although his training was in English, he wanted to use it in journalism for social improvement among the less privileged classes in India where he went.
Which would be fairly radical then, I would think, with the caste system and that kind of stuff.
He was a lot, well, he passed a good way from the orthodox caste system. He was, arrangement was made that he had vegetarian food because as a Brahmin, one of the highest castes in India, they normally were vegetarians.
Oh.
Except if you're a Brahmin living in Bengal, vegetarian doesn't means that you eat meat, but you don't eat meat, but you eat fish if anytime you want to. So the Bengalis living on the sea, they're very, very keen on their fish dishes.
Adaptive.
So Bengali Brahmins can eat fish. But other parts of the country, usually they don't.
Be reasonable.
So why your family came back to Canada on this furlough kind of thing, but you decided to stay in Canada to study because
I trained as a nurse.
But you didn't want to train in it. I mean, there wasn't anywhere to do that in India?
There would have been, but the training was much better, and
you had the opportunity to come back. It was around the time they were going to come through. Back. So how long would they stay back here during that?
it's a year. Years furlough, or 18 months, is it?
A year at that time. I think it was a year plus travel time at that time.
So the travel time must have been something. Did you come by
Boat.
by a boat, which would take how long? Come back
About a month.
A lot of time if you were seasick, I'm sure.
Oh, if you had a
You were lucky if you could make it in a month.
So would you sail to?
from Bombay to England through the Suez Canal.
And then you'd stop in England and then start again. So that would be quite the trip for me.
Oh yes.
That'd be cool.
Marvelous way to travel.
Nobody has the time to do that much anymore, though.
I think the better trip is the Pacific when we went that way.
You came back that way one time?
That was the first time we went to India. She had come from India before, but when we went to India together. In 1933, the autumn we were married, and studied in Marburg, Germany, for the better part of a year.
Well, he studied, I didn't.
You sat around and tried to learn German at the grocery store, probably.
You were had a very good friend there in our landlady.
Yeah.
Excellent person she was.
Right.
Anyway,
So what did you take? Theology, for some version?
yes, I did more work in New Testament studies than anything else. I did some work with a person who'd been quite famous for his studies of Asiatic religions, in particular Hinduism, Rudolf Otto. But he was getting old at that time and not in too good health. I did work with Heiler, a man who had made a study of Asiatic religions, more of Buddha perhaps than anything else, but over a wide range. I did some work with Frick on the history of European missions in the East. Those are the main things. And of course, the biggest part all of them was to do all this in German.
Right. And did you have any German before you went?
I hadn't done any formally in school.
None?
But you had some from working with these people in construction?
Not so much that. I told you that when I was working in summers, did one summer barn building, 2 summers Frontier College at Churchill. Then more because it was a requirement than anything else, I had to do some work in the church in Canada before I could go on. And so I did 1 year in the Peace River Block in BC on mission work there. And I learned a lot that summer. I don't know whether...
So there'd be a lot of German people in that area?
No. There were mostly people, it was the beginning of the dry years. People from southern Alberta and British Columbia more than anywhere else who got driven out by the drought there. Came the late 29s. And from then on. So I always thought I gained a lot there. I'm not sure about others.
So where'd you get the German, though?
And then
Practice of that.
came the next year. I said I had expected to go for a year study until Ida and I, hopefully, could find a way of getting married and living together. I wanted to go to the Peace River country for that. Then I got this chance to go to Marburg, and the director of the Frontier College asked me if I would go to BC to help work with set up educational work there in some of the labor camps. Because you see, that was 32. The Big Depression started to crash in 29. All young men, they were without work and they wanted to. And without the social supports that we have now, some of them not sure where they were going to eat. So I set up the work camps, some of them for road building, highway building, some for making airports. Asked me to go to southern BC, where a lot of the unemployed people had gone simply because they were BC was a more comfortable place to live than some of the places. And I had to study the situation there. Find people who'd be interested in undertaking what I had to offer, and being the liaison person between the camp, or potential camp, the worker, and the who wanted to go there, and the Frontier College office which was in Toronto. My center, I was saying southern BC. A fair bit of my time I had to spend in Vancouver. So once I went to the University of BC, asked about anybody around there who did tutoring in German.
Because you were trying to get ready to go, you were trying to get this done, but get ready to go to Germany at the same time?
Yeah. And I got a man there. He was a Czech, not a German. Spoke German very well, and he did quite a bit of tutoring in UBC. So I worked what time I could get with him, other time with books, in between work to get other places, work with books that he was able to get for me. Done that. Then we went to Germany, half prepared.
Well, then you're in Germany and you're learning all this stuff in German. And so then how do you get ready to know any languages in India?
You wait till you get to India.
You wait till you get to India.
Yep.
And then they do kind of a crash course for you, or you just...
The first year they have language school.
First year, nothing but. Next year...
But you obviously wouldn't need, because you would have had the languages, I guess, all of them, eh?
Not romantically.
Okay. But
I could talk the vernacular.
would they put you through language school as well? So they did that with wives as well, to make sure that you were equally well prepared to work as well. So would they pay you like both of you are actually doing the work?
No, it's someone's salary for the two.
Yeah. But they assume that you're going to be participating.
Well, part of my work was having a family.
Yeah, right. Right.
And
but I guess all ministers, there's always the assumption that all ministers' wives are going to do a certain part of supporting the work of whatever. I just always find it interesting that they just always do it on one salary, though.
Lorraine might be interested about how you're working with children there. Developed into a thing which maybe was of significance.
What were you doing with kids, Ellen?
I was a nurse. I had nurse training. And it's really pathetic to see so many children, beautiful babies. And the mother would never feed them anything until they have teeth. How can they eat? And so until then, they just nurse. And it's not enough. You have these beautiful babies and sad to see them going down and down. And they, many of them die. Well, the first place we lived in Carwa, that's a little village really, and there was one Indian nurse there because it was an area where, particularly for women, there's no hospital. And this nurse, well, I was asked to look after this little unit. And we'd get in children and teach the parents how to cook, what food to give them. And the best of it was they'd see my healthy kids. And it was just...
So part of it's teaching by example, because they obviously saw that your kids were thriving, gaining weight.
Well, the funniest thing I found was one of these women who was really very silly with her children. And I taught her how to feed. That is tapu.
Oh, yes.
And then later on we heard she was back in the village and she was giving lessons to other people, teaching them how to look after their kids.
Now, what would you be feeding the kids over there? I mean, what would be available for sort of starting foods for babies? I mean, obviously you didn't have pablum in boxes at the grocery store.
But there is one. It's a fine wheat cereal, suji. And it's like a cream of wheat.
Yeah.
It's sort of a coarser type of cream of wheat, isn't it?
And they'd teach that.
And what would they mix that with? Breast milk or just water? Or?
Water if they had milk. The thing is that amongst the villagers there, they won't feed a child anything until they have teeth.
Yeah.
How can they eat? They say.
So it wouldn't have occurred to them to feed kids cereal?
No.
Now, did you have fruits like, I mean, here one of the first things you start feeding kids as far as fruit is mashed bananas or... No, so you didn't have any of those?
Well, in villages like that, people couldn't afford to buy things.
But there wouldn't be anything growing like fruits like that you could feed babies?
No. And you would get bananas in India. But other fruits, no. And bananas are expensive for villagers to buy.
But you did a lot with, didn't you, with the cereal that they had?
Yes.
Especially the wheat preparations, and particularly goat's milk.
Goat milk is very good.
Because lots of people will
have a goat.
To keep a cow.
And that milk would be richer than what they were producing as far as their own breast milk too?
Yes, I don't know that it's richer, it's more easily digestible. Goat milk is. But there was one in Car where we were now, the first station we were in, there's just one nurse, Indian trained nurse, and one little ward. Used to deliver babies there. That's all.
So were you in a community that had missionaries before, or were you, so the way had been paved in some ways
Yes.
for you?
No. Practically all in that area they've been missionaries for many years. When did they start off? Missionaries in Central India.
Oh, goodness.
My parents were missionaries.
I'd have to look it up.
Oh, that was the same area that you'd come from then?
Started, the very first in that area were before 1800. But not many.
And it was a Canadian Presbyterian. And when there's church union, my parents, who were Canadian Presbyterian, joined the United Church. And the mission field out there was divided. There's some still Presbyterians there, Canadian Presbyterians.
Divided officially, but ever since the two areas worked together. Traded personnel according to needs.
Were many other denominations in there, Anglicans, Catholics?
In India, definitely all around, but not
in your particular...
Near where we were, two Anglican churches in the whole area. And the provision of chaplains was very scanty in the Anglican church. Through the area was very scanty. So half the service in the Anglican churches were conducted by United Church missionaries or other United Church personnel. And we, according to need, we simply traded back and forth among the others. Names mattered exceedingly little. It was the people and what needed to be done and what we were able to do.
Now, did you just preach and work in one location? I mean, there's a picture you have of you speaking from an old treadle sewing machine with a clock on it. So does that mean that you weren't in your normal location, or it was just an open-air service?
Oh, I wasn't, as I just said, Christian work had been going on through the area a number of times, for a considerable time. I was asked to give help where I could to Christian ministers and other workers in the areas in which we were stationed. Now, my work went from literacy work, training in literacy work, how to teach others.
Teaching at the seminary. You did.
Pardon?
You taught at the seminary.
Yes, that came later. And then training of potential leaders among the young people of the church. Building on literacy, training in literacy methods, a basic understanding, more of the New Testament than anything else. And that was emphasized in a lot of the reading, too.
Didn't you do some translation work at some point?
And
That was into Hindi?
I've got to say that then you're asking what I did. During the monsoon season, it was practically impossible to travel. I mentioned people worked where they were needed. I was quite often drafted to the theological school in Indore to help in the teaching there. When I couldn't move about in the mud of the monsoon season.
And raging rivers to cross without bridges.
There, of course, all my teaching was done in Hindi. And then about translation, I felt that study of the language was really the key to getting close to the people there, making contact with them. Some work in the teaching I did, preaching I did, might be translation, but nearly all was struggling, took a good deal of struggling, working with the language of the people themselves. And also I felt there was something very significant there. There was always the danger that you go there and ask somebody who understands some English to translate for you. Again, that's a break in the continuity of communication. I could go on with a long story there. And that led on our first furlough, where this matter of language as a means of communication, how that was to be used. I don't know why. Maybe somebody has an eye on us that we don't know about. I was offered a chance to go to New York and do some special study in language and theology in Christian missions in India.
So what university would that be at?
I did half my work in Columbia University in New York and the other half in Union Theological Seminary, very roughly that. But the two worked right hand in glove there on the same campus, and they combine resources again. And the big thing for me was the most magnificent libraries I've ever had anything to do with. They just had the stuff there if you wanted to dig. After a year there, they decided I should do another year. That's a slow learner, I suppose.
Were furloughs usually supposed to be sabbaticals? Or not necessarily?
It varied a lot. It varied a lot. And that was in wartime.
That's partly why you were home too.
They said I wasn't to go back to India immediately, and that was sort of collusion between Union Seminary and our missions board.
Because it just wasn't safe enough for
Told me I should continue in school and do better.
So did you all move to New York for that year? Because how many kids would you have had at that point?
Margaret and Barbara.
And the second year we were there, John was born during that year.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I remember that in the American thing.
And
That's right, he was born in New York. So he can go to New York, to the States.
He's got dual citizenship?
Yeah.
the study I did there, I think, helped in this matter of communication, realizing the potential of Indian languages for communication in something which we were brought up to think of in English.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it was after that you started doing more translation? And
I was a translations advisor of the Bible Society of India. And that meant developing work, basic work that could be used for Bible translation or for the writing of Christian literature in India.
Mm-hmm.
It was at that time that Melrose chipped in, very nicely gave a gift which was helped in some of the publications for that. And from doing a bit of writing in Hindi myself, I was made editor of the Hindi books that were produced for Christian ministers and teachers at that time.
Now, was the Bible all fully translated into Hindi at this point? Mm-hmm.
When was the Bible translated into Hindi? That was long before you went out.
First translations began in the 18th century.
Mm-hmm.
Good deal more in the 19th, and then there was more than one translation. We have more than one now.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just sort of in use, they sifted themselves out as to which proved the more acceptable.
Right.
The best translation that was done was of the Old Testament, done by Kellogg and his group.
Mm-hmm.
Incidentally, when we were in New York, we met his granddaughter who was there. We became a very good friend of her and her husband. They were in Union Seminary at that time. But
Now, were your parents still in India working at that point? And they were there during the war then?
Yeah. When
they were there through part of the war. Your father died
Right.
when Barbara was fairly small.
yeah, that's right.
Your mother continued.
So your father died in India?
And,
No, mother came here. She died here.
oh, yes.
Yeah.
Your
I
father died in
stayed
India.
with my brother.
But your mother had lived with us. And we went back to India, and she was living with Neville,
Yes.
as his brother. In this writing of literature, more and more trying to get Indian writers.
We could have the cultural,
Background there.
yeah,
Um,
perspective on everything you were translating to.
I was at first made the editor for books that were published in Hindi. Some by English-speaking writers and some very good work. But still we're working for, and I think the best was done by Indian writers that we're developing. Now, it should have been an Indian person heading that up.
Who did after you left?
I started it because we felt it had to be started, and everybody said, well, you do it too and get somebody better. Funny thing happened. Men I knew very well. Right in Indore, I was teaching pretty much full-time in the theological seminary in Indore at that time. In the arts college there, the head of the Hindi department was a man with his degrees in both English and Hindi, was a very sincere member of our church there. Came for a little time. I told her I'd have to go back home. Had talked with him,
So you could take over?
telling him that with his interests, and he had already done some significant work in writing himself in Hindi, in stories and hymns and things like that. As far as any of us could see, he was the person with the ability and the motivation. He asked a few questions, so I'll think about it. And talk to him later. He says, I've asked early retirement from the university. He says, I'll retire on a lower pension than I would otherwise. He said, and I'm prepared to devote my full time to the work of Christian literature. And all of this literature credit is by the whole area covered by the language. It isn't no division of churches. Right through it. We had from Quakers to Roman Catholics. And from that time, I don't know how old he is. He has kept going from then till now. And his work in Christian literature being done through that organization under his direction, which never has happened before, of the quality or the amount. And it's being accepted, and lay people are reading it as well as ministers and Christian leaders. It's quite significant. One of the best books in the series is written by a chap who at one time was one of my students.
Oh, great.
And anyway, I was commandeered by arrangements of our mission board to do some work throughout India, and a little bit in Pakistan, on the matter of cooperation among theological colleges and schools within the different language areas, and the building up of Christian literature in the Indian languages. And we got some rather significant people working on that, and better work done than had been done before. So,
Now, when Uncle Bob would go off to do his teaching at the theological college, did you and the kids move too, or did you stay back in indoor, I guess you were at the time?
He was teaching in indoor.
Oh, the theological college was right there.
Yeah, so we moved to indoor.
Now, did you come to look forward to your furloughs back home, or, I mean, was it something, oh, I can't wait to go to furlough time to go back home, or was it something that sort of you thought, well, you know, I have to...
Well, it's good to have a change. You get tired. Retirement isn't all that it might be. And it's... well, my family too, quite a number of them are here. And
So you wanted to see them? Yeah.
Margaret and Barbara came here before we left India. They came.
Yeah, and that must have been difficult too, having to leave kids.
Yeah.
Because it was after the age of 16, they wouldn't pay for them to travel back. Wasn't it 16?
What is it?
Was that the cutoff point? Was it after 16 they wouldn't pay for the kids to travel back to India?
I don't remember.
No.
But they were here in the schooling. They were to, if they were to live in Canada, they needed schooling.
Right. But that must have been difficult to think, you know, you're going halfway across the world leaving these kids in your late teens or whatever they were at the time.
Well, they have a school which in India, up in the mountains, where the climate is good. And a lot of the missions cooperate with that. And it's an American-style school. The United Church gives one teacher, two teachers. To have two. And appoint them there.
So the kids had been going to that school before they came home?
So that it isn't such a break.
Just some kind of transition for them. So it was a boarding school as well?
Yeah, we had to leave the kids then.
So that was probably to help mums and dads adjust to kids not living with them, as well as help the kids catch up education-wise or being...
I used to go up with them when school started. It started in March. Because it's too cold before that, living in unheated houses. And then I'd stay up there. He'd come up for holidays in the hottest time. Then I'd go. Then the monsoons would come and the climate to cool off, and we'd put the children into boarding then. And they'd stay there till December when school closed. Just too cold then.
Right, so then you'd have...
Then they'd come down to the plains.
Where it wasn't cold.
Yeah. Oh, we just cool enough. But I mean,
How cool.
occasionally, please. But with the type of houses you have there, it would be quite cool.
No, you didn't have, what would you do for heat, like at home? Well, I mean, when you were in indoor, when it got cool.
Put on a sweater.
You didn't have wood stoves or...
We did have a fireplace there, didn't we? I don't know. But usually just put on more warm. And usually it's sunny in at that time of the year. Go out in the sun and sit there.
Sometimes what's done at the schools. If the day was very cool, the teachers would take the kids out and have them sit in the schoolyard in the sun, sit on the ground. That, of course, was in schools, in places where the teachers were rather free to do as they pleased. But quite often in elementary schools, especially, would do that.
But didn't you have some connection with the World Health Organization at one point? Or some... Oh, how would you have met Dr. McClure?
Oh, he belonged to the United Church Mission, and he was in charge of...
He was in China, wasn't he? Mostly?
He was in India finally.
Was he?
How many years was he in India? A long time. He and his wife Amy.
Yes, and during the time that they were in India, we saw quite a lot of him.
But how would you have met him in the first place?
In India.
When he arrived in India.
Oh, okay, because you would see him because he'd come in to do that first year of language studies, and I guess it would be a fairly small group, fairly close-knit group. Everybody would meet the new people coming in kind of thing?
Well, language study would be from all the missions, all the Hindi-speaking areas. There'd be a special language school that you would have to attend.
But you were in India before he got there.
But I went to language school to learn it grammatically, which I never did.
Right.
I still speak
I'm just
vernacular.
wondering if we get a chronology in this.
I don't speak Hindi like he does because I'm brought up speaking more vernacular.
Well, it's just like learning anything in school. You learn differently than you do in the country. Can you still speak Hindi?
Nobody's tested you lately, I guess.
That's about McClure. Oh, we enjoyed him very much. He and Bob was just all get and go. And Amy, his wife, was so gentle.
Laid back.
1948, Bob McClure left China. 1950, he left Toronto when he returned from China. Went to 1950, left Toronto and went to the Gaza Strip in Israel. In
He died there.
here we are. (1954). American Baptists take over the Gaza hospital where Bob had been. McClure arrives in Ratlam, central India.
But you've been there 20 years then.
In India.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yes.
How long were we in India altogether? When did you?
1934. You came home the final time in 1964. I in 1965.
So a good 30 years.
30 years.
So why did you come home the year before?
It was a matter of getting the kids into school here.
And I mentioned that there was came along the time when I had a responsibility under the National Christian Council of India, traveling to most of the theological schools throughout the country.
So she was away.
Oh, if you weren't going to see him anyways, you might as well come to Canada.
And I was had promised to be there until 1965.
So what did you do when you came back in 65? I mean, I know at one point you did library work and then you went to BC. But that wasn't right in 65, I don't think, was it?
In 65, came home. Every time a missionary comes home, he's supposed to report to the church, wherever he's sent, on what's going on and give an account of himself of what he has tried to do in that time. So a good deal of my time was spent traveling about the country.
All across Canada? Or just Ontario, maybe?
It was mostly Ontario and Western Canada at that time. Ontario to British Columbia, actually. And
Where was I at that time? Where did I stay with the kids?
Scarborough.
And they have mission apartments there.
Oh.
And children still go to school, some of them.
At which time? In 1950 something? No, in 1960 rather. You lived at Jack and Margaret for a while.
Yeah.
Then we got rented the apartment in Scarborough. Then
you went back to school.
we asked to be released from mission service because Ida had a very tough time the last couple of years. That was one reason for coming back to Toronto early when she was with Jack and Margaret there. And it did not seem the right thing to go back when condition wasn't there. And so we asked to be released from mission service. That's the end of 65. Then I was asked to go in as minister of supply to Teeswater up in Bruce County, where the minister had left, and to go there for the next 6 months. Because changes of ministers are more often in the middle of summer.
Right. So you went up there.
And then about that time,
I didn't go.
you visited sometimes, and sometimes I visited you when you started. And I'd done some lecturing in the theological colleges across Western Canada about India. Got a request from Union College in BC. Would I come there? Would I consider either two positions that were going to be vacant there? One was they needed a teacher of church history. The other was Union College and Anglican College, which was just a stone's throw from them. The two had decided, looking forward perhaps to complete union in the future, that in the meantime they would unite their library, at least unite their library policies. They keep the two collections in two buildings, but in all the selection and buying of books and administration of them, they wanted one librarian to take charge of the whole of that through that change. I asked more about what they wanted for teaching in the New Testament, in this church history. They said it would be Reformation and after. I said no, because I wasn't good enough in that area. I had studied early history because a lot of my studies about use of language in the church in India linked up with what happened in the use of language in the early church. So I said that if they wanted me, they said to take a year's training, head up the joint program for the two libraries, I'd stick my neck out for that. But it wouldn't, with my inadequate knowledge of history from the Reformation on in the church, it simply wouldn't be fair to students. I hadn't the stuff.
So you were up there for how long teaching them?
So they told me they wanted me to do a year in library school to get official qualification, like a union ticket.
Right.
And then I was in indoor 7 years. 67 to 74. We liked Vancouver.
But you stayed up there after you retired. No.
No, we didn't.
You came back here in 74?
We considered. We wondered about staying there. Two considerations. Both family and people we've known for a long time were a lot more here than in BC. But the other consideration was financial. There was a big real estate boom had started in Vancouver
So housing was
a
high.
couple of years before we left there. And we simply could not have
Paid the price or something?
considered an adequate down payment to buy a house there. Price would just shoot. I'm quite sure we'll get something here. So, we arranged. The United Church has a place in Beamsville. You may have heard it. What's the name of it?
Albright.
Albright. Put in an application. Yes, be a cottage available for us there. First of July. So we terminated the lease on the place we were renting in Vancouver. After that was all done, then we got a letter from Albright Gardens. We're very sorry that we can't
Find room for you. No room at the inn.
we can't honor our offer. We're sorry, but we can't. So I know about it. Then out of the blue, a phone call from Margaret. She was in Sudbury, saying that Jack's mother been living here, and she just hadn't been able to come in here, and Jack had bundled her up and taken her to Sudbury Hospital. And later was getting a place for her in St. Andrew's Church Home there.
So this house was available? And
Well, what Margaret said, we've persuaded Jack's mother to let us offer the house for rent for a year until you're well enough to go back and take possession of it. She had her doubts about us. I think maybe they did some
she wasn't sure you'd be good tenants or something, Mary.
Well, I don't know anybody but she could look after the place properly. And so anyway, at the end of that year, she'd met at Sudbury several of the former cronies, because she and her husband had who lived and worked in Sudbury. And several of these had got elder now and were living in the home where she was finding.
So she wouldn't want to come back here at that point.
She came every so often, have a look around.
Yeah, just make sure.
Well, she'd come and stay with us in the summer and spend time with her old friends here.
Oh, good reason.
And it worked well on. We didn't know more than a year at the time whether we'd continue here or whether we'd look
Right.
somewhere. We're continuing.
Well, it's a great place, though. Probably going on this week or last week or next week, and you kind of lose that continuity of people's lives. Like sometimes you remember hearing a scrap of something,
I remember.
you know, about Grandma Clark or something.
I remember what it was like when we were kids. The older people quite often would get together after a meal together, and they would talk about who had lived where, who had married whom, what they'd done afterwards, and so on. And when that started, we kids,
Clear out.
we were cleared out of it. We were
Boring.
looking for a place to play outside.
Right, yeah, because none of it seemed very interesting or relevant to anything at the time. But it's interesting because when my mom's brother died, I was just watching what she's already taken, about 3, but